A major ruling that looks like a win for SpaceX on the surface, but leaves open serious questions about a clause in the Texas Constitution. That today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. Other stories we're tracking: Texas Tech and Texas A&M trying to narrow a healthcare gap in rural Texas. We'll hear how and what it could mean. In North Texas, another World Cup match for Argentina today, this time against Austria. Another chance at history being made, while all eyes are on the pitch in Dallas today. Plus, after the excitement has faded, remembering a basketball championship that might have been and the impact that may last longer term. And remembering a pioneer in Tejano and Mexican folk music. Those stories and a whole lot more today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 22nd day of June 2026. I'm David Brown. For generations, Texas has embraced a pretty simple idea. The beach belongs to everybody. It's a principle so important that Texans voted overwhelmingly to put it into the state constitution. But what happens when one of the most ambitious private projects in the world needs access to that same stretch of coastline? Well, at the southernmost tip of Texas near Brownsville, Boca Chica Beach has become the front yard of SpaceX's massive rocket launch operation and ground zero for a local controversy with broader implications. Every launch requires safety closures of both the beach and the only road leading to it. Supporters say that's the unavoidable price of hosting a cutting-edge aerospace industry that's put Texas at the center of our new space race. Critics argue that Texans are gradually losing access to a public beach that, well, the Constitution says belongs to them. Now the Texas Supreme Court has weighed in. In a unanimous ruling, the court rejected a lawsuit brought by environmental groups and others seeking to challenge those closures. But the decision doesn't actually answer the biggest question, whether Texas's constitutional guarantee of beach access can be overridden by laws allowing those closures in the first place. Instead, the court focused on something narrower but potentially just as significant, finding that private groups don't have the legal standing to bring this particular constitutional challenge. The result leaves SpaceX's launch operations intact, but raises new questions about who, if anyone, can enforce Texas's beach access rights when they think those rights are being restricted. To help us unpack what this ruling means and what it doesn't, Joe Papalardo joins us. He wrote about this issue for Texas Monthly. Joe, welcome back.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Tell us a little bit more. I think the last time we talked to you, there was a public hearing that the Texas Supreme Court held in the Rio Grande Valley to talk about this. Can you explain the verdict and what the issue was?
It's a little arcane because it's legal wrangling. What the court really focused on was, could these groups, could these people, could they bring this suit? And the answer was no. The question that they didn't address is whether the quote-unquote unrestricted right to beach access is more important than the state's interest in protecting public safety. I don't know if it's just groups or even an individual who says, I want to go to the beach and now I can't. My rights are being infringed upon. And now the state's saying, well, it's not safe for you to go to the beach and we can close it, if there's a hurricane but this is action that the state is enabling and encouraging. It's not a hurricane, it's a rocket launch, and those are extremely predictable. If someone brings that lawsuit, because they can't refile this suit with new language because they have no standing.
We should explain the groups that were suing. We had some environmental organizations as well as the Carrizo Comecrudo Nation, which is a Native American tribal entity. And the court here said that neither of these two groups had legal standing. And so if an individual can't bring standing because they're not, I presume, big enough to be representative of the right at question, nor can these groups representing groups of individuals who seem to have an interest, I guess the court seems to sort of have left open the question of who can bring a lawsuit here, who can make a challenge.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to the attorneys. I get the impression that you and I are wrestling with this in the same way that attorneys are, or the same way that environmental groups are. I think people are looking at this saying, well, what can we do next, right? I mean, if the groups can't do it, individuals can't do it. If it's not in our power as the public to enforce this, and we're counting on the state to enforce it for us, they're clearly saying we're not going to do it. There's going to be conditions set upon this that supersede your constitutional right to an open beach, which seems to be in contradiction to Open Beaches Act. But then again, there's language in the Open Beaches Act that they point to saying this was set up in such a way that lawsuits couldn't be filed in such a way. You know, this was something that Texas had done on the environmental front that other states hadn't done. And there's a very short list of things that Texas has done in sort of the environmental movement, quote unquote, saying, hey, look how progressive they are. And the Open Beaches Act is one of them. And now this is kind of showing how to water it down.
Well, now, stepping back, do you see perhaps this case representing a broader tension that Texas is likely to face more often in the future? Because we've seen, these economic development projects promising jobs and investment, and there are longstanding public rights to land, water, and access. For instance, the religious freedom claims brought by the Carrizo Comecrudo Nation. Those have not been decided, nor did the court seem to be trying to decide them here.
No, not at all. They went out of their way to point out that they weren't. I think they said something, without attempting to specify the extent to which unrestricted rights to the beach give way to countervailing interests. They're leaving that for another day. All they said was these guys right here can't file the suit. This was the biggest, most impactful, most potentially harmful thing for SpaceX, which would be this, very vast power. And it could have driven SpaceX into the arms of Florida, where they have launch locations there, too. So it's not like SpaceX had zero options. But again, this is part of the NASA program. This is the race to the moon against China. This is Texas economic standing. So it's the state, it's the feds. It's bigger than just this beach. And I don't think any of these justices wanted to be the ones in a couple of years someone pointed to and say, hey, you lost us the moon to China or something like that.
Joe Papalardo writes for Texas Monthly. We're going to link to his latest at texasstandard.org. Joe, thanks so much.
Pleasure was mine. Take care.
A big World Cup game today when Argentina plays Austria at Dallas Stadium in Arlington. No matter where you're from, many eyes are on the Argentine national team this year, knowing that history could be made, since a legendary player on that team could well cross a few more milestones in North Texas. KERA's Andy Lusk reports on what could be the last dance for Lionel Messi.
Unless you've been living under a rock for 2 decades, there's a big name in soccer you've heard before.
Messi.
Argentine superstar player Lionel Messi, who's about to turn 39 years old, is coming to the Dallas-Fort Worth area for the World Cup. This is the 6th time he's appeared in the tournament. The jury is still out on whether this one will be his last, but it's likely. Fans here in the Metroplex enjoyed Tuesday night's match against Algeria from afar. At Argentina 163, a Euless restaurant hosting a crowded watch party, fans weighed in on Messi's career and the team's chances to make it to the end. Carolina Rivarola is from Argentina and lives in North Texas. She says Messi is the best player in the world, someone who shows everybody who's the boss. But in her eyes, it might be time for younger players to move up the ladder.
Even though Messi is great, but the other players are great too, so you gotta give room for the new ones, if not, we don't gonna have teams, everybody's gonna get old.
And speaking of age, another fan at the watch party, Dylan Eccles, is skeptical of Argentina's chances.
There's way too much talent in other countries. I think Argentina is a very old squad. They won the last World Cup. I think it's very hard to repeat wins of a World Cup.
The match against Algeria ended 3-0, with Messi scoring a historic hat trick. He's now tied for the most World Cup goals in one player's career. Messi might break that record while in North Texas. So, despite his career potentially winding down, what still makes Messi, well, Messi? Fans say there's a lot to it, with plenty of moments worth holding on to. During the match against Algeria, fans came out in droves to see him play live in Kansas City. They spoke to our colleagues at KCUR. Oscar Quiroga is soaking in Messi's last dance.
Messi is from another planet. I can tell you right now, he does not do things normally.
Another young fan in Kansas City, Jeremy Rodriguez, traveled from Nicaragua to see Messi play.
It was like the best game ever. That was so cool. 3 goals from Messi. That was like the best thing ever.
Messi led his team to the World Cup title in Qatar. It would be a big deal, to put it mildly, for Argentina to take home the cup 2 tournaments in a row. Venezuelan sports journalist Tommy Arguelles thinks although this is likely Messi's last World Cup, he'll try to repeat the title.
This is a player that has a big gift, and probably in some games he will be on the bench, but he's still very dangerous.
Arguelles pointed to another key part of Messi's legacy, his longtime rivalry with Portuguese superstar Cristiano Ronaldo, who's currently 41. Arguelles says while Ronaldo has notched a number of important wins, the World Cup is the only thing missing for him. But the cards are still on the table, so to speak. Matches deeper into the tournament are still taking shape. There's a chance a showdown to remember between 2 legends moving toward the ends of their careers will happen here. I'm Andy Lusk in Euless.
Audience and engagement editor Wells Dunbar joins us now with a Talk of Texas on this Monday. Welcome back, Wells.
Howdy, David. Great to be with you. How are you faring with this summer heat, and what are you doing to stay cool? That's the Talk of Texas, their question for listeners this week. And obviously, it's a hot one with most of West Texas under a heat advisory. Yeah, Central Texas heat index is tying an all-time high over the weekend. Triple-digit temperatures, the norm for much of the state. So in other words, summer is here, and it is a hot one. So we're looking for folks' suggestions. What are they doing to stay cool? This is, of course, part of our Talk of Texas project, and you can leave a voicemail message for us at texasstandard.org/talk with your pro tips, including this one from Christopher Bart. Maybe not so much an unexpected piece of advice, but an important one, and not one to neglect. Get that AC tune-up going into the summer heat. You don't want that thing to crud out on you there. I'll be back with plenty more suggestions, including some ones more off the beaten path later on in the program, David.
Yeah, that's Wells Dunbar with more of the Talk of Texas in about a half hour or so. Coming up this week in Texas music history, and how 2 major Texas colleges teaming up in hopes of narrowing a health care gap in rural Texas. Stay with us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Realtors, providing representation at every stage of the home ownership journey, helping clients understand their options and manage complex transaction details. Info at texasrealestate.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from TrialMed, conducting clinical research for over 30 years. Info on current trials in Texas at trialmed.com.
A note here for our podcast listeners. At this time on our broadcast, we usually hear our segment This Week in Texas Music History. Unfortunately, we can't play it here on our podcast because of issues with music streaming rights. However, you can find it over at texasstandard.org or check out a version on Texas Standard's Facebook or Instagram page. And as always, we encourage you to listen to the Texas Standard every weekday on your local public radio station. Barriers to care like lack of health insurance and long drives to facilities create complications for rural Texans with chronic diseases and disabilities. Samantha Larned of KTTZ looks at how the health science centers of Texas Tech and Texas A&M universities are teaming together with community health workers to narrow those gaps.
In April, the Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center and Texas A&M University Health Sciences Center hosted a tour of their latest collaboration, a clinic built in a retrofitted shipping container in rural Burton, Texas. The partnership between the two schools began last year with another container clinic in Fort Davis. Each of the clinics are operated by community members, with primary health services provided by Texas Tech physicians and behavioral health by Texas A&M Health through telehealth. There's no insurance necessary, and patients pay a flat rate of $30 for telehealth services. Dr. Cole Johnson was recently appointed as the Chief Operating Officer of TTUHSC, and for the past year, he has served as the Senior Vice President of the Center's Division of Rural Affairs. He says the clinics are a great example of the ingenuity and collaboration it takes to bring healthcare solutions to rural areas.
If you look up the Department of State Health Services data by physician licensure, there's 40 counties in Texas that do not have a licensed primary care provider. I think that's where this desire and really mission-driven focus comes from, is knowing that there's a need and knowing that we have the capabilities to help address that need.
Johnson says TTUHSC established the model for these community-based clinics through a project in Marathon. Marathon is a census-designated place in the Big Bend region with a population of about 400. Danielle Gallo is the board president of the Marathon Health Center. She says the original clinic in the building opened in 1995, but keeping operations proved challenging.
There's really no way to financially support a traditional clinic model in a town the size of Marathon. It just doesn't work. You can't make money. You can't even really break even. So over and over and over again, we would just lose our contract and have to start over from scratch.
The primary medical center for the region is about 30 miles away in Alpine, but it can be difficult to schedule appointments, which can be especially challenging for those with chronic conditions and those without insurance. According to the U.S. Census, Marathon has a disabled population of almost 32% and an uninsured rate of almost 22%. After losing yet another contract in 2017, the president of the clinic board at the time started looking into telemedicine options and reached out to Texas Tech as a collaborator.
I like to think of it as we beat our heads against the brick wall to create a doorway for the people who came behind us, and we're very proud and happy to have done that.
Today, the nonprofit clinic has 2 full-time employees, yoga classes, traveling practitioners, a licensed professional counselor who comes in once a week, and does not charge for tests and lab orders or nurse visits.
It's very scalable. Like, it can be as small as a janitor's closet with internet access and a blood pressure cuff and a scale, or it can be as big as a facility like ours that has multiple exam rooms and a community room and offices.
A janitor's closet, or a shipping container. The Davis Mountain Clinic in Jeff Davis County was the first collaboration between Texas A&M and Texas Tech Health Sciences centers. Carol Brewer is a registered nurse, the clinic's executive director, and its only employee.
There's no clinic in this area. The closest one is about 25 miles away in Alpine. So this just provides a local resource so they don't have to drive so far through the mountains.
She says she gets a lot of drop-ins of people coming in with general questions. She even makes home visits for people who can't come to the clinic in person. Over in Burton, a small city with a population of about 300 people, Mark Rosenbaum is a paramedic lieutenant at Washington County EMS and a registered nurse. He has worked in emergency medical services for about 15 years and has spent his whole career in rural areas. He says that whether it's 15 miles or 100 to the nearest doctor's office, it doesn't make much of a difference for those who don't have transportation.
There have been multiple times we've taken people to the hospital via ambulance because that's, quite frankly, the only way they can get into town to go see a physician. So a lot of these people don't even have primary care.
A local ministry, Burton Bridge Ministry, had been looking into ways to bring a clinic to the community for years, and Rosenbaum says it joined with Washington County EMS to try to find a partner to provide telehealth care. Eventually, they found Texas A&M Health and TTUHSC. The in-person services at Burton Southern Clinic will be provided by paramedics.
They're the ones that are actively going out and seeing people, trying to do preventative care in the communities. So we're going to use those guys to staff it. So we'll be the hands and the eyes and the ears of the physician. The eyes and the ears get replaced by the telemedicine equipment.
Dr. Johnson with the Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center says this kind of community-based care can help improve health outcomes for a population. A 2021 data brief from the National Center for Health Statistics found that in 2019, rural areas had a 20% higher death rate than urban areas, even when accounting for different age demographics.
Healthcare is sort of staked and anchored in your community. I think it changes the community's perception of how they perceive and embrace healthcare as part of the fabric of the community.
In Fort Davis, Carol Brewer is seeing those changes firsthand.
There's people out here that they've told me they do not know what they would have done if we hadn't been here. Providing things that are so easy for people that live in urban areas to access to the people in this area is going to make for a healthier population.
In Lubbock, I'm Samantha Larned.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Monthly, producer of Where the River Took Us, a podcast about the July 4th floods from survivor Aaron Parsley's perspective, through the voices of his family and others, telling the story of grief, healing, and survival. Available on all podcast platforms.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Harrop. The State Board of Education this week will discuss and adopt new curriculum and reading lists for Texas students. KERA's Bill Ziebel reports critics say it overemphasizes Christianity and brings ideology into the classroom.
The Republican majority 15-member state board will give final approval to new social studies and literacy standards that include Bible stories and lessons on American exceptionalism. Advisors who helped develop the new standards say they, quote, create an American and Texas identity. Southern Methodist University Religious Studies professor Mark Chancey says the curriculum lacks balance.
There's a concerted effort to teach history from a perspective that highlights Christian contributions and ignores others.
The new curriculum standards would go into effect in 2030. I'm Bill Ziebel in Dallas.
Investigators are trying to determine whether a Tesla was on autopilot when it crashed into a home in the Houston area. Video from the neighborhood shows the Tesla Model 3 driving at a high speed just before slamming through the brick wall of a home that killed a woman in the Katy area. The Better Business Bureau is reporting a spike in scam phone calls offering loans. Our Rob Salinas says officials say don't take the bait.
Chances are you didn't apply for a loan, but that's not stopping the calls from coming in.
I can get you approved for $32,000.
Up to $27,000.
$25,000 at 5.79%.
Cosme Ojeda II is the Lubbock Regional Director of the Better Business Bureau.
We are inundated daily with phone calls about these propositions.
He says the good news is the scammers don't have all the information they need to raid your bank account, otherwise they wouldn't be calling. The bad news is it's almost impossible to stop, especially if you make the mistake of calling back.
You do not want to be added to a scammer's list of a callback, because then they will sell your number to other scammers saying we have someone that will respond.
Ojeda says they're seeing a spike in fake loan calls as well as tax repayment calls. Tips on how you can reduce the number of calls can be found on the Better Business Bureau website. I'm Rob Salinas in Houston.
And San Antonio Mayor Gina Ortiz-Jones says she supports the cancellation of a July 4th Alamo Dome concert by Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. He has been a controversial figure in the past for his use of anti-Semitic comments. Jones posted on social media saying that she was against the idea of a city-funded stadium hosting the event, especially on the nation's 250th birthday. I'm Matt Harrop in the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. In the final seconds of Game 2 of the NBA Finals, Victor Wembanyama grabbed a rebound and passed it up court to teammate Stephon Castle. Castle didn't see the pass coming, so it hit him in the back and...
Stolen by Brunson!
The Spurs lost that game. And then... the finals. And for many, these hiccups looked like inexperience. Wemby is 22, Castle 21, and the Spurs were the second youngest team to ever make the finals. Dan Solomon is a writer for Texas Monthly who's been reflecting on this series. Dan, thanks so much for joining us on the Texas Standard.
It's good to be here.
Well, the youth of the Spurs was one of the big talking points headed into the series. Do you think that that was a deciding factor, though, in this overall loss, or were there other issues?
I mean, there were certainly other issues, but I think that you can't really overstate how, a young team of players who are just getting their first experience, who weren't supposed to be here yet, are more likely to choke the way that the Spurs did. I think it's fair to say that they choked, but I also think that, without making excuses for it, you can reasonably expect that they've learned from this and that, those aren't the mistakes that they're likely to make the next time they're in this position.
You said that Spurs fans are, quote, used to being outside of the easy sports narrative. What do you mean by that? Say more.
Yeah, I mean, the Spurs for decades have been this sort of unflashy team, and that's really speaking in contrast to the Knicks this year, who had all of the celebrities, who had the 5.5-decade drought, who kind of captured the imagination of the basketball watching public. This was the most watched finals in many years, and it wasn't the most watched finals because a lot of people wanted to see the Spurs; they wanted to see the Knicks win, and and that was a kind of a weird experience, watching as a Spurs fan and watching from Texas to realize that the broader conversation isn't about the team that you care about; it's about the other one.
Right. Well, and do you think that the Spurs team, I mean, they kind of love that. They talk a lot about the culture in San Antonio and the culture that the team owner and the coaches have built. That it really is this family atmosphere, and that they like to defy expectations.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that makes the Spurs so satisfying to root for, is that when you get outside of, Central and South Texas, there just isn't that much, people don't really care. They don't really see the team as anything special. And that makes them more special to, people in this part of the state that, doesn't have another team. Like, San Antonio gets one and they really, really care about it. And I think that's great.
So this loss in the finals, a huge disappointments. I mean, they were historic leads that were just, sucked away in the second halves of games, right? But you're right that this story isn't about the finals, that this really is just the beginning of the story about this team. Do you really feel this optimism that there is so much that they are building right now that they can take into future seasons?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's be frank, like they tanked the last few years to put this roster together. And, they were so successful at putting together a young roster of, future superstars that the NBA made it impossible for anybody else to do that in the future. So, they kind of got away with something in putting this team together. And so, yeah, of course, there's a lot to be optimistic about. I think that these players aren't going to get worse. If the biggest problem was youth, and I think that it was, then that gets cured just by the passage of time. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to look forward to.
Well, so there's little to mourn about the end of the Spurs season, you say, because there's so much to look forward to. Is that really the bottom line?
I think so. I mean, this season would have been a success if they had lost to OKC. It would have been a success if they'd lost to Minnesota, probably. Like, they shouldn't have been this good this soon. Seriously, a few different plays at the end of a few games, and this is a completely different story. Yeah. And I don't think you'll see those mistakes happen again.
Dan Solomon is a writer for Texas Monthly. Dan, always a pleasure.
Good talking to you.
Well, summer heat the order of this Monday. Highs ranging from the low 90s in coastal areas to over 100 in West Texas. Mercury should hit 93 in Austin, 92 in Dallas. Heat advisory in El Paso today, hitting the triple digits, perhaps as high as 106. It'll reach 92 in Houston, but the humidity expected to make that heat feel especially oppressive. Dry conditions across most of the rest of the state. Stay hydrated. Keep it here for the very latest.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, offering degree programs and research focused on workforce development, student success, and health innovation across Texas. The University of Ambition, utsa.edu.
It's not just about the brisket or the ribs or the sausage or even the sides. It's the culture and people who are passionate about it. Where there's smoke, there's Daniel Vaughn, Texas Monthly barbecue editor. Make sure to join us Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Where There's Smoke comes from HEB.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The 2026 Texas Democratic Convention will be held in Corpus Christi later this week. Delegates will consider nearly 20 resolutions about Israel. Houston Public Media's Andrew Schneider reports this comes amid rising anti-Semitic sentiment in both major political parties that's leaving some Jewish voters feeling politically homeless.
Shortly before the May primary runoffs, the leading candidate for the Democratic nomination in San Antonio's 35th Congressional District, Maureen Galindo, posted on Instagram that she wanted to turn an ICE detention facility into a prison for American Zionists, claiming most Zionists are pedophiles who should be castrated. The backlash was swift, and Galindo tried to walk back her statement.
I want billionaire Zionists in prison. That does not mean I want Jews in internment camps.
Houston area Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher was one of many Democratic officials who condemned Galindo's statements as abhorrent.
You had members of Congress saying if she is the nominee and if she is elected, we're going to move to expel her because she doesn't represent our values.
Galindo, who did not respond to a request for comment, went on to lose her runoff election by a significant margin. But Arthur Pronin, a Democratic activist in Meyerland, Houston's leading Jewish community, says there's little to celebrate.
She got 4% of the vote with it on every broadcast in America. And still some people said, I'm still not worried about this.
Galindo's attempt to parse a difference between being anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist struck some Jewish voters as a distinction without a difference. Most Jewish Americans, whether they identify as Zionist or not, believe Israel has a right to exist. That's according to a survey by the Jewish Federations of North America, though younger Jewish Americans report feeling less of a connection with Israel than older ones. It's an open question whether Galindo's loss will have any ramifications for this week's Democratic convention in Corpus Christi. Pronin worries it could be a repeat of the 2024 Democratic convention in El Paso, where similar resolutions targeting Israel were proposed.
Many of my Jewish friends who've gone to every convention have told me this time they're just not going to go because it was so unpleasant last time.
The resolutions being considered include a call to accuse Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, as well as a call for an arms embargo on Israel. Imad Salem of the Muslim Democratic Caucus of Texas authored those two resolutions.
I think sending weapons to Israel while they were killing 72,000 Palestinians in Gaza makes us complicit in this genocide.
The proposed resolutions make no mention of the Hamas-led attacks of October 7, 2023, which triggered the war in Gaza. Paul Colbert, a delegate to the convention, says that's part of the concern for some Jewish Democrats, arguing the measures overlook the events that led to the conflict.
These resolutions pretend that that doesn't happen and that there's no blame, number one, associated with that. And number two, that Israel's legitimate response to fighting that attack somehow or another, you don't have to worry about the fact that they were attacked.
If anti-Jewish sentiment were rising only among Democrats, it might trigger a mass migration by Jewish voters to the Republicans. But that's not the case. Texas U.S. Senator Ted Cruz told the Republican Jewish Coalition in March that he has seen anti-Semitism on the right spike in the last 18 months. Cruz specifically called out Tucker Carlson as a demagogue who has given a platform to Holocaust deniers, such as the far-right white nationalist Nick Fuentes.
And I don't want to wake up in 5 years and find myself in a country where both major political parties are unambiguously anti-Israel and unapologetically anti-Semitic. And I think that is a real possibility.
Cody Weaver is a former Plano ISD school board member. He recently made an unsuccessful run for Collin County Commissioner as a Republican. He says Republican voices there are now openly attacking not just Zionists, but Jews.
It's incredible what has been labeled as okay or a nuisance for the Jewish community, that for any other community, if it was racism or if it was Islamophobia or if it was something against national origin, it wouldn't be tolerated. But here in Plano, with a huge Jewish community, it's tolerated. And that blows my mind.
Beau French, now the Republican candidate for Texas Railroad Commissioner, tweeted out a survey asking, who is the bigger threat to America, Jews or Muslims? French answered a request for comment by pointing to rising anti-Semitism among Democrats. Mark Oppenheimer, an expert on religion and politics at Washington University in St. Louis, says he sees common threads between the anti-Semitism that some have long viewed as the province of the right and anti-Zionism on the political left.
A very useful way, if you were to kind of pick one word, would be obsessive nature and overwhelming explanatory power. So people who think that all the evils in the world, or a disproportionate share of evils in the world, are the result of, say, Israel or quote, Zionists, are, in my mind, very suspect.
Scott is a former Democratic activist from North Texas. He asked to be identified only by his first name for his and his family's safety. He says many of his one-time friends in the party tried to split hairs between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism after October 7th.
And I just refuse to fall into that trap, and I just call it Jew hatred because that's what it is. It's a permission structure for Jew hatred.
Scott now considers himself politically orphaned. Yvette Pinter, a Democratic precinct chair and an activist with the group Houston Jewish Women Vote, sums up the dilemma many Jewish voters now face.
I think increasingly many of us feel a bit homeless.
That's also a concern of Nori Leader, the founder of Houston Jewish Women Vote.
For the first time in my life, I understand people not wanting to vote. I don't advise it. It's not my personal philosophy.
Yehuda Kurtzer, president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, a Jewish think tank, has written on the issue of American Jewish voters increasingly feeling politically homeless. He says to abandon both parties is to choose to become powerless.
All that does is it takes you out of having a position of having any sort of agency within those parties.
Kurtzer says one of the major reasons for the rise of openly anti-Jewish candidates in both parties is gerrymandering, which tends to promote political extremism on both sides. If that's the case, growing polarization could force Jewish voters to make harder and harder choices when the time comes to cast their ballots. I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
Personal information from more than 3 million Texans are in the hands of hackers. A vendor for Texas Parks and Wildlife Department was hit by a cybersecurity breach last week and gained access to details for people holding hunting and fishing licenses. According to the Houston Chronicle, it's one of the largest data breaches in the state this year. Some of the information hackers gained includes access to contact information, driver license details, and passport numbers. Texas Parks and Wildlife released a statement saying many of its own staff were also affected by this incident and, quote, "We are committed to continuing to work with the license system vendor to implement increased safeguards to prevent future incidents." TPWD says hackers did not gain access to other key information, including social security numbers, dates of birth, and banking or credit card information. Texas Parks and Wildlife says affected customers are eligible to receive a year of free credit monitoring. There's more news online at texasstandard.org. You can also keep up with us on social media. We'll be right back.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact. Support for Texas Standard comes from Good Spread, an Austin-based mineral sunscreen brand seeking to make clean, reef-safe SPF for every body under the sun. Now at H-E-B stores across Texas. More at goodspreadsuncare.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. As we saw evidence of just last Friday and across this weekend, Juneteenth celebrations have changed a lot over the decades, from family reunions to large festivals. KERA's Zara Amici spoke with Dallas elders who remember Juneteenth before it became a federal holiday, and with a new generation of organizers carrying on the tradition.
For Dallas genealogist Donald Payton, Juneteenth has always been about community. He remembers celebrations filled with food, music, and family.
People were coming together in a joyous mood.
For generations of Black Texans, Juneteenth was one of the biggest days of the year. Families traveled across the state to reunite, parks filled with people celebrating freedom and honoring the generations who survived slavery.
People came out and they started cooking in advance, and they made lemonade and ice cream, and they played baseball, and national bands came to town.
Equate Tahimba, founder of Pan-African Connection Bookstore and Art Gallery in Dallas, remembers similar celebrations growing up in Waco. As a child, Tahimba didn't fully understand why the holiday mattered so much to the older generations. But over time, she came to see Juneteenth as a day to recognize both freedom and resilience.
I remember just that we had each other, right, in that moment, and that we could depend on each other in those moments.
Today's Juneteenth celebrations in Dallas look much different. Since becoming a federal holiday in 2021, it's grown into a regional event. Corporations host celebrations, festivals attract thousands of people, communities gather in ways that previous generations could not imagine. But younger organizers say the mission behind the holiday hasn't changed.
Juneteenth is homecoming. It is history derived of its own backyard.
Eric Hardiman-Roan is the founder of Seasons Change, a Dallas arts collective helping shape a new generation of Juneteenth celebrations.
How do we take what was dark and make it light and something celebratory? How do we make it something meaningful to the land that it was born from?
For organizers, the event isn't just about entertainment. Seasons Change is also launching a nonprofit called the Change Foundation to connect emerging Black artists with mentors, workshops, and professional resources. CEO and executive producer Sasha Bowman says they will need elder art leaders to help with mentorship. Seasons Change will bridge the gap between generations.
There's a lot of community leaders within the spaces that are Dallas, but a lot of them don't know, what they need to lead or how they need to do it because they don't know where to look. They don't know where to start. And we want to be able to show them, hey, this is where you can start.
For elders like Tahimba, efforts like these represent an important passing of the torch. But she says younger generations shouldn't have to carry that responsibility alone.
Juneteenth should be a time that we come together, set some direction, understanding where we've come from, understanding our history, understanding where we are now, but understanding we have a lot of work to do. And it's going to take all of us to do it.
Peyton agrees. To him, Juneteenth should be more than a single day of celebration.
We got to make it a point that we work in the present to preserve the past for the future.
And that idea may be what connects Dallas's Juneteenth celebrations across generations. The format may change, but the purpose remains the same. I'm Zara Mechi in Dallas.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. Audience and engagement editor Wells Dunbar joins us now with the talk of Texas. Wells, how are you handling all of this heat?
Oh, man. Well, let me tell you what. It started with a trip to Walmart, David, and a purchase of, I believe, I want to say a 300-gallon pool, one of these inflatable ones.
That's nice.
It's
how's
it's,
that working out?
It's nice, because it's small enough so it can fit on the patio, say, but also deep enough that it is, you can submerge the whole body. But I'll tell you what, I will say pool maintenance has been a little trickier than I thought it would be. I don't think the aquarium filter we got was quite up to snuff. So we may have to recalibrate this weekend, but that's one good way, I think, to try.
You haven't gotten the water bill for it yet, have you?
No, that one's due as well, too. But as you can tell, we're talking about ways to beat the Texas heat this summer. It's our topic for the talk of Texas staying cool. And if you've even spent one summer here, you know the drill. How the errands get done before noon, how you got to touch the steering wheel like it's a branding iron, and every parking space with a sliver of shade feels like you won the lottery. So we're taking advice here from our listeners on how they're doing it, and we want to hear more advice. But some interesting creative solutions we've gotten here so far. Tolbert Pittman, he found the ultimate heat hack, and it involved a little international travel. He says we escaped Texas to Bogota, Colombia for 3 months this summer. You wouldn't think it, but he says the high today is going to be 65. Yeah. Kind of like El Paso, you got that like desert. It's like that mountain desert.
But not today, man. Did you see what they're predicting? They're talking about like maybe 106, maybe 109.
Yeah, truly bad stuff. Yeah, I was speaking to my mother out there in El Paso, and yeah, she said the temperature was like 105 yesterday. So a very difficult. Yeah, and obviously part of West Texas and a huge swath of West Texas under a heat advisory out there. Rick Krivoniak, he offers a little historical perspective. Interesting to think about this here. He says, every summer, I wonder why those covered wagons stopped here. And then I think, they came here from Louisiana. So I guess it could be worse a little bit on the humidity count there. Russell Jones has his summer routine down to a science. He says, yes, he's running all his errands before noon, hydrating like an elephant, and then day hibernating in the AC unless going out is required. I think harking back to that whole pool thing, if you're going to spend any time outside in this summer, you got to do it near a body of water. So whether, you're escaping to another country, hiding indoors until sunset, or just trying to outsmart the sun with the right gear, some of that like sweat whisking UV protecting stuff I'm talking about, you got to find your way to make it through. But we want to hear from folks. How are they staying cool this summer, and what is their go-to Texas heat hack? So tell us, please. We want to hear your voice. Literally, go to texasstandard.org/talk. Press that orange record button on your smartphone. Leave us a message so we can share it with our audience on air. Because, like you're saying, David, it is brutal out there. So if there's anything you can think of, that could help someone, we'd love to hear it. My son, he just came back from scouting camp. He was out there for a full week and surprisingly did pretty well. Lots of things, they had like solar powered fans to run at night that you charge during the daytime and they blast you all night. He also had one of those, I don't know if you've seen those cool, they're almost like scarves, but perforated, almost like sort of like a basketball short that you can dampen and they keep you cool. Those things work. Super helpful. So there's lots of stuff out there, but it might be good just to hear them all sort of laid out. So again, go to texasstandard.org/talk. We'd love to hear your advice.
Wells Dunbar monitoring the talk of Texas. Our producers and reporters include Sarah Ash, Shelley Brisbane, Michael Marks, and Sean Saldana. Raul Alonso's our digital producer. Leah Scarpelli's our director. Casey Cheek is our technical director. We'll be back on the air tomorrow, and we certainly do hope you can join us.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Wooldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family.